Hey, greetings and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sam, and I'm going to be bringing the gospel. And that's good news. And according to the Oxford Dictionary, gospel means A, the teaching or revelation of Jesus Christ. B is a thing that is absolutely true. And C is a set of principles or beliefs. And so we're going to be able to have a set of principles and beliefs through the teaching and revelation of Jesus Christ, which is absolutely true. Now, before I continue, I want to make something perfectly clear, is that I'm not a teacher, I'm not a professor, I'm not a pastor, a deacon, or an elder. I'm not an apostle, and I'm not a prophet. Okay, I'm just a disciple of Jesus Christ. I follow Jesus Christ. I filter my entire life through the lens and the words of Jesus Christ. And that's what gives me freedom. That's what gives me freedom. It gives me wisdom. It gives me understanding, and it gives me knowledge. But in order to receive that knowledge, that understanding, and that wisdom, is you have to be a fool. You have to be a fool in order to receive wisdom. And believe me, I was a big fool. I was a big fool in believing the lie that this world has to offer. Because all this world offers is nothing but lies. Everything this world says is just a bunch of lies. Now, I know I'm going to date this video and talk about politics, but we do have an election coming up in a couple days for the President of the United States. And we have Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. Now, just with our own eyes, they want us to believe that this race is neck and neck, like neck and neck. And I mean, how is this even possible? Donald Trump has been running for the last year. He's been doing campaigns, rallies for like every day for the last couple of months. He gets tens of thousands of people. In some cases, hundreds of thousands of people have gone to his rallies in California and other places. And then you got Kamala Harris, who just jumped onto the scene about a couple of months ago. And they're supposed to be neck and neck. She was never voted into this position. In fact, in 2020, when she tried to run for president, she was in the bottom of the list at like less than 1% from her own party, the Democrats. But yet they want us to believe that they're neck and neck. I mean, I can't believe this. This is just, they're lying to me. You know, I'll be completely honest with you, though. I totally thought that Joe Biden was going to win the presidency. I totally did. I thought because of what happened in 2020. This guy did like 3 campaign speeches from his basement, never went in front of anybody, and yet received the most votes in world history. I'm talking about world history, not just American history, world history, at 81.5 million, with about 40 million of those mailed in. Now, I'm like, nobody went to go check these doors. Nobody checked this or checked that. So I figured that he was going to win again. But this is what I did think was going to happen, is I thought that when he did win again, that he would possibly die within his first year or two. And Kamala Harris would become the first woman president. That's what I thought. Or maybe they take him off to a resting home. But I really didn't expect him to be in such bad shape like he was when he debated Donald Trump. I was like, oh my God, I don't think we have a president. To be honest, I don't think we've had a president for the last year. I don't see Joe Biden making decisions. He's in bad shape. And so it took me by surprise. And so now we have Kamala Harris and we have Donald Trump. And so on Sunday, Donald Trump had this mega rally, right? And he had all his supporters, but it really got me upset, right? When he had this guy who apparently is some racist, whatever, I don't know, Tony Hinchcliffe, and trying to make something racial on Donald Trump's platform, political platform that is worldwide a week before election, to rant off his whole, like as though he's okay to just like disrespect everybody and insult people, insult other races. These weren't jokes. All right, let's make something perfectly clear what a joke is, okay? This is the definition of a joke. A definition of a joke is a thing that someone says to cause amusement or laughter, especially a story with a funny punchline. Well, that's a joke. That's funny is a thing that causes amusement and laughter. But what he said was insulting. Why? Because the definition of insult is to speak or to treat with disrespect or scornful abuse. Now, when you call an island a bunch of trash and Jews being greedy and, carving watermelons with blacks, are you being disrespectful or are you being funny? You're being disrespectful. That's what it is. Now, I could say this because of the fact this guy, he's in his 40s. I'm in my 40s. This other bonehead, JD Vance, he's in his 40s, right? Who's defending him and saying, we all just need to lighten up and we shouldn't be so serious about everything. No, what you did is you're insulting. This isn't going to be the new wave. We ain't going to do this on a national platform. And that's the way I view it. I went to school with these type of people like JD Vance. He knows us, right? JD Vance knows us. Why? Because he comes from a single family parent home. His mom worked 2-3 jobs. He was poor. He grew up poor. So he knows what it feels like to be us. And now we know who JD Vance is too, right? And the reason why we say that is because he grew up poor and now he's making about $15,000, $20,000 a month, so he don't want to give up that job. He don't want to give up his job now, right? So he's going to be polished and play the role of being a senator, right? If Donald Trump loses, he's off to the next thing. He's going to continue doing his political run. He's going to shake hands with the enemy, Tim Walz, whatever it is, and they're just going to go on life like nothing else, right? That's him. Why? Because he will never want to give up his $20,000 a month job. So he knows us and we know him, right? Now, here's the thing. I'm just being, I can only speak for us who are in our 40s. And to me, I wasn't here in the 40s, in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I was here in the 90s. Okay, and me in school and growing up in Riverside, I forgot to bring my hat, but the point is that where I was at is if you're being racist and you want to be a racist and this and that, you need to stand up and back up what you're saying, and in other words, you need to be ready to get down. You need to start fighting, and this is where a lot of those racists come from. They put tattoos, swastikas on their head and swastikas on their chest, and they stand by what they say. They're ready to fight. They're ready to do everything. They're ready to go to prison, join prison gangs, and they have a rough life in the long run, right? Because now they're a part of their gang. They devoted their life to this, and that's the way I grew up. And I can only say that because this guy's in his 40s. I'm in my 40s. This is my classmate. I went to school with this guy. You know what I mean? I mean, this isn't somebody like Joe Biden who's in his 80s may say something. I don't know what he was raised in the 50s. I don't know. I'm not that old, but I know what it was like in the 90s. And for him to try to do something that Don Rickles did back in the 80s, I'll be honest, Don Rickles should have gotten beat up, right? I mean, who is this guy? Just completely being racist and disrespectful. These aren't jokes. These are insults. Just look at the definition. And so the reason why I say that is I kind of lost a lot of confidence in Donald Trump who he surrounds himself with. He surrounds himself with a bunch of white supremacists, apparently. I mean, if you ever see this guy's Kill Tony, I guess that's his YouTube thing, man. This guy just goes off. It's just his whole thing is just racist this, racist that. Like seriously, straight up racist dude. And that's fine. You get yourself a comedy club, you get yourself a YouTube channel, whatever you want, and you can say whatever you want to say. Mexicans are dumb, blacks, whatever. You just talk about everybody. But to bring it on a nationwide platform and not getting checked for that by your own people, I don't know if I can support this. I mean, I already know that white dudes are going to be supporting him all the way, right? White dudes are going to be like, it's just a joke. Who cares if he talks about Mexicans, blacks, Of course, white dudes are going to support this guy. right? And white dudes are supporting the guy everywhere you go. Oh, people need to lighten up. He was just kidding and this and that and everything. But what really like amazes me is when like you have like a Latino like supporting this guy. Yeah, he calls your island, you trash. It's like he's being racist in front of everybody towards you. Why are you supporting this? I'll just be honest. There's just one word for it: is you're stupid. You're dumb. You're stupid. I mean, if it's best for you just not to say anything. Don't support it. Don't disagree or agree with it. Just be neutral. But supporting it is kind of like one of those battered spouses that come, black eye, and but he loves me. He loves me still, because even though he beats me and he tells me all these names, he still loves me. And I'm like, what? How in the world? I expect that from white dudes, right? White dudes are always going to be like, oh, we need a freedom of speech. We need to be free to make fun of Mexicans. We need a freedom to make fun of Latinos, and people need to just take it like a joke. These aren't jokes; these are insults. And because of this, I feel like if Donald Trump can't control his people around him, I don't know. I don't know if this is actually a good idea for me. And like I say, Donald Trump, he should be winning in the landslide as it is. But I actually think that I'm going to be voting for Kamala Harris because nothing is done to this guy. This is the circle. They're all millionaires. Like who did he have up there? Dana White. Dana White, the one who is the UFC president. You think this is in the good book? You think you can find this in the Bible of knocking each other's teeth in and breaking sockets, eye sockets, and concussions? Is this in the Bible? Can I see this? Are you sure these are Christians? Elon Musk with his, rocket to the moon and space aliens and blah, blah, blah. And they're all connected to that other podcaster, Joe Rogan, who's what? Complete alien freak. This guy's like, oh, all aliens and blah, blah, blah. Atheist, doesn't believe in God. And I'm like, are these Christians? Does it really matter? It really doesn't matter. And what I say is, it gives you freedom. Anyone who tries to invoke God and telling you that you need to vote for Donald Trump, who's been married like 3 times, married and divorced, an adulterer. I mean, you could do whatever it is you want to do, period. And I may help those who are on the political end because you hear the church, oh, you need to vote, you need to do this. Okay, well, then I'll vote for Kamala Harris. How about that? I'll vote for her. Now, there's no way in the world she should be winning, but I'm going to vote for her because everything's a lie anyways. Everything's fake. Like I've said before, how are you supposed to have an honest election with a bunch of liars? But everything's fake. Hollywood, just look at Hollywood. Everything you see on TV, that's just all fake. The fake superheroes, like Spider-Man and Superman and Batman. And the lie is, I want to go and I want to be the next Superman, I want to be the Mexican Superman, or I want to be a black Batman, have a black guy as Batman, or have a Asian to play Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And you know what people will say, right? Is they'll say, what? There's no Asian Spider-Man. There's no black Batman. There's no Mexican Superman. And I'm like, well, what are you saying? Is there really a white Superman? Is there really like a white Batman and a white Spider-Man? I want to see this. Where are they at? Where's Superman flying in here? Superman? I want to see Spider-Man, white Spider-Man. You really got bit by a spider? It's all fake anyway, so what does it matter? Well, there could be a black Thor. What does it matter? It's all fake. There's not a black Thor. There's a white Thor? Where's he at? It's all fake. Everything's fake in Hollywood. Everything's fake. Everything this world has is a lie. Everything. The lie is you go to Hollywood, you could become an actor. It's such a minute percentage of people that actually become actors. And so it's a lie. The lie is you go to college and you get your degree and now you can make a lot of money. But sometimes your degree, it gets outdated in 10 years. Nobody needs your degree. Or you have to move to a different state. You thought you were going to get a job in Chicago, But little did you know, you're getting a job in Nebraska. You didn't want to live in Nebraska. You wanted to live in Chicago. But everything's a lie. And then to top it off, you got to hope that they even hire you, which a lot of people with college degrees don't even get the job they went to school for. Now they're making a lot less. They got $100,000 tuition. $100,000 loan that they got to pay off. Everything in this world that this world has to offer is a lie, all the way down to even the food. Like Subway. They've been having a $6.99 sub sandwich for the last, couple of months. I've gone there a few times. And when I go and I look at the picture, what do I see? I see meat bulging out of the sandwich. I see a ton of meat coming out of the sandwich. But then I order it and they make it and it's all squished. And by the time I get it, it's like about this much meat. It's all smashed, just like a sandwich like I make it at my house. I'm like, why doesn't this at all look like the picture? Because everything's a lie. Everything's a lie. If you join the military, you'll be able to have the VA for the rest of your life. You can retire early, get paid for it. You can put house, you don't have to put down payment on your house. You don't have to put down payments on your car. You got all these benefits if you join the military. But you know what they don't tell you? Is that you could die, in the war. You go to a different country and you could die. You could die in training. And what happened to the lie that was told to you? It didn't happen the way it was supposed to happen. Everything's a lie. Buy a house. And guess what? Now you're a homeowner. Are you? You own a house with a 30-year mortgage. You got to be paying this for the next 30 years. Are you going to continue working at the same job? Are they going to have layoffs, cuts in 20 years from now? You got to keep paying for this house. And even when you pay for the house, you still got to pay taxes on it. Every year you got to pay taxes. If you don't pay taxes, they take your house. You never really own a house, right? Everything is a lie. This world is nothing but lies. And I fell for all of it. I grew up and I was born into a Christian home. I have Christian parents, not only Christian, but my dad was and is a pastor my entire life. He's been a pastor when I was born, so I always had the word of God spoken at my house, right? We always had Bible studies every night. We would be in church Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, and we would visit all the time, different families, 4 or 5 times, 3 or 4 times a week. And so I always had, this upbringing of being in a Christian home. And I don't really like this term of sheltered, but it was a sheltered kind of living. Now, the reason why I don't like that term is because sheltered from what? Sheltered from evil from this world? It wasn't sheltered. It was just living in a good home, being raised right. But the problem is that you have to live in this world, right? So I guess we can use that word, but that was the home that I was brought into. And so I've always known God. My entire life I've known God. And one weekday, my parents, what they like to do, this was back in the 80s, all right? This is when I was a kid. I received the Lord Jesus Christ when I was 7 years old, and I was baptized a year later when I was 8. But one of the movies that we saw was called A Thief in the Night. And this is actually on YouTube. You can actually see it if you wanted to. But this is during the Jesus Revolution, and Jesus is coming back tonight, And there's no doubt that Jesus Christ is returning. But it has its pros and its cons when you're speaking like that in a Christian home with Christian children, or at least it did with me, and maybe it may have some effect on some others that were brought up in the same way. Because when we show this movie in the church, this is an apocalyptic movie. It's about the end times, about Jesus rapturing the church and the tribulation of people getting their heads cut off. And when I look at my mom, and ask her, I said, is all this, true? And she's like, yes, it's all true. Well, it's could be scary. And I wanted to make sure that I was not only right with God, but that I wanted to be used by God. And so I received the Lord into my heart at 7. And a year later, I was baptized at 8. And the reason why I say it has its cons is because when you're 7 and 8 years old, you can't fathom being 78 or 88 years old. You can't fathom 70 or 80 years down the road. And if you're expecting Jesus to come back tonight, then what's the point of school? What's the point of planning? What's the point of anything? We're ready to go up. Where's the Lord? Let's go up. So the point is it's not about thinking about when Jesus is returning. It's about living the life right so that you're always ready. You don't have to try to be ready. You're just always ready. That's what it needs to be. And the reason why I say that is because when I was 8 and I got baptized, it was like the devil just completely just threw a lot in my plate, a lot of evil, I would say. I was introduced to pornography. Back then, it was either, dirty magazines and videos. I'm not going to get into detail, but why? I don't know. I never looked for anything in my life. It was just brought to me. I never asked for anything, but I started, smoking weed at 11. I was drinking alcohol at 13. I didn't start with beer. I actually started with liquor. I started drinking 13, like whiskey and vodka. And I didn't ask for any of this. It was just given. Everything was just presented to me. But going back to when I was 8 years old and living in my house, everything was always a judgment now, right? It was always like their version of iron sharpening iron, right? That's what Christians like to use. Iron sharpen iron. And so everything I was always like, under a microscope. Everything I did, I felt like I was, sinning. I was always like a sinner. It was kind of like a mental kind of thing because, that was even a year when I was like 7 or 8 after watching this movie. And I told my parents about this, and I already mentioned I was going to, mention this with my parents on this video, but that for a year after school, I don't know what I was, 2nd, 3rd grade, I didn't know if my parents were going to pick me up because I was thinking that they were gone in the rapture because I couldn't stop sinning. Or everything I did, I felt like was a sin. And so that's kind of the way I was kind of, in that situation. And like I say, it's not good because if you're thinking that the Lord is coming back at any moment, then what's the point of 50, 60, 70, 80 years down the road? I would never think about reaching 80 or 90, and so it ruins a lot of planning and preparation to get to that point. And so anyway, I remember even just water guns, being said, oh, look at you, call yourself a Christian and you're over here playing with water guns. And you like guns and this and that. I'm like, they're water guns. I'm 8 years old. I remember being in church with other kids, like maybe a group of 15, and the Sunday school teacher of that church. I forgot who it was, but whoever was there, she would always point me out because I was the son of a pastor. And she would act like as though I knew everything in the Bible. She would always be like, okay, and so we're going to be talking about Genesis. And you know this, right, Sam? You already know what the Bible says and everything. I'm like, why do you keep pointing everything at me, And it was just the devil. It was just the devil. And it was, a lot of evil, I would say, because it was trying to turn me away from the Lord, which ultimately it did because it was kept told to me that you don't want to be lukewarm. Because if you're lukewarm, then God's just going to vomit you out of his mouth. God wants you either hot or cold, but not lukewarm. And it was until now that I'm much older and realizing that being cold is not a bad thing, right? I like a lot of things cold. I like my ice cream cold. I like my sodas and my drinks cold. I like, you know, ice to be cold, right? I mean, ice cold isn't a bad thing. And so when God is saying that he wants you either hot or cold, it's just basically being one or the other. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be lukewarm. It's not saying that being cold is bad and hot is good. My point is this really affected me in that time growing up? And at the age of 10, to be honest, I just told God. I told God in my own heart. I told God in my own soul, as I said, I want nothing to do with you anymore. I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want to pray to you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to hear about you. I don't want to speak about you because I don't want to be lukewarm. I couldn't stop sinning. Evil was being presented to me. One of the things that I remember when I was a kid, this is like in the late 80s. So again, I was like 7 or 8 years old, whatever grade this is, second or third grade, is that this movie called Colors came out into the theater. Now, they call it Colors. I don't know if it was because, it was a gang movie with red rags and blue rags, or if it was Colors because there were just a bunch of Mexicans and blacks. I don't know why they call it Colors, but it was Colors. What I do remember is I remember going to school and my peers, my other classmates, they're 7, 8 years old, asking me when I'm in school, am I a Crip or am I a Blood? Like, first of all, like, who's your parents? Like, who's teaching you? You know, like, but I wasn't thinking of that then. I was just kind of like, well, what do you mean a Crip and a Blood? I didn't know anything. And now, as an older, like, who's taking their kids to see Colors? A 7, 8 year old. But I remember growing up and like, we never had this. And so it started to make me like elevate the world, like as though the world knew something that we didn't know. Like the world was like special or smart in some way. Giving them like a special, like, oh, the world, like they know something. Now you ask me, the world don't know nothing. The world is nothing but a bunch of lies, but we'll get there. And so as I was 10 years old, I just told God, I was 10. I said, I want nothing to do with you. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And from 10 to 19, I had nothing to do with God. And it happened to be that during that time, from 11 years old, it was about 6th grade to the 12th grade, that we just kept moving. This is another thing I mentioned to my parents, is that we just kept moving all the time. I went to 8 different schools in 6 years. Not that I was being expelled or I was being a problem or anything like that, but it was just that, I was just being, we were just moving all the time. And so I went to 8 different schools in 6 years. I went to like 3 elementary schools. I went to 4 different high schools, different junior high, ended up graduating from an adult continuation class. So I was just constantly being the new kid in school. Now, a kid could survive maybe 2, maybe 3 times being a new kid. But when you're like always the new kid every year during the most important time in your life, it really messes you up. This is the most important time. And I just wanted to fit in because I was always a new kid. I'm like, why are we moving all the time, every year, packing up our belongings and unpacking and packing up our belongings and unpacking? And it bothered me, and I always was just trying to fit in. And this is some good advice for today when you deal with adults as well as kids, is that it's very, very easy to make bad friends. It's very easy to make bad friends, and it's very hard to make good friends. Now, if I wanted to be with a bunch of friends right now, I mean, I could just go to downtown Austin, buy a 30-pack of beer, go on 7th Street and just hang out there at the homeless place and just hand out beers to people and just drink beers and just tell stories all night. Right? They're going to love that. And I'm going to have a group of friends just like that. We're going to talk, we're going to drink, we're going to have a good time, or we can buy drugs, whatever, it don't matter. It's easy to make bad friends. And this goes for school. In school, you can make bad friends all the time. What are bad friends? Bad friends are the ones that ditch all the time, that are on drugs, they failing school, they have no plans for the future. These are bad friends. Why? Because there's nothing hard about it. All they do is just sit around, play video games all day. But it's hard to find good friends, those with actually have a schedule in their life. They attend vacations, they have plans to go to college, they're applying for college, or just in general in life here. It's hard to find good friends, people that are successful and to come together. So that advice goes a long ways. But I did go to 8 different schools in 6 years, and I still don't know why we had to move so much. And even when I was 19, my parents, after I graduated and got my diploma, they moved out of state. But that's a different story. We'll get there. So during this time, I remember I was 19, and during this time I was doing a lot of what bad adolescents were up to, which is drinking, fornicating, cussing, watching bad movies, TV, everything. And anyway, I was at this one party when I was 19, and someone gave me a tab of LSD. That's acid. That's a hallucinant. I'd done it once before, a long time ago, but I don't even know why I did it then. Like I say, I never looked for anything. Everything just came given to me. But this time, again, it was given to me, a tab of acid. And so I put it in my wallet, and I didn't take it for about a month and a half. I was looking for a right time to take it, because with this drug is that it lasts a long time. It's a hallucinant that goes anywhere between 10 to 12 hours. And I also heard that when you take it and you drink orange juice, it enhances the effect. So there was a day that came, which was a Wednesday. And this Wednesday, I knew my parents were going to be gone all day. By this time, my sister and my brother were married. So I was the only one in the house. I was 19. I knew my parents were going to be gone, besides maybe about an hour window. It was a Wednesday because they were going to go to the service in the evening. And by this time, I wasn't going to church anymore. I wasn't going to the church with them. My parents, they've always been in church, right? They've always gone to church. And to this day, that's what they do. They serve the Lord. And that's what they say that their life is dedicated for. My parents live by a very simple rules in their life. It's basically treating others the way you want to be treated. And so they view it as, if they're not going to be cussing around you, if they're not going to be smoking around you, if they're not going to go to your house and drink and get drunk with you, then why do you want to do that with them? Why do you want to disrespect them and cuss among them and smoke and drink? And they're not doing that to you. So why are you doing that to them, right? And one of the other things that I mentioned with my parents is the only thing that they're going to live by is by the Word of God. And that's the way they were raising us. If we ever had an issue, any problem, open the Bible. Let's read the Bible. That's it. They didn't have their own 2 cents. It was always what the Bible said. And so there needed to be explanation for me. I needed to know about worldly things. And to that, they say, well, how can we teach you the world when we don't know the world? How are we supposed to teach you something that we don't know anything about? And that's actually pretty smart. And I know the way the world is, because the world is always like, well, it's the parents' responsibility. The parents are supposed to teach the kids about how bad the world is and this and that. But I like to use this analogy. The analogy is, let's say you have a car and you keep your car unlocked in front of your house, right? Your car's unlocked. And one day you go outside and your car's gone. So you call the police to file a report that your car's been stolen. And the police come to your house and they say, okay, well, we're here to file the report. So what happened? Yeah, our car was just stolen. Okay, well, did you leave the doors unlocked or did you leave the keys in the car? Or, well, we left the doors unlocked. Oh, okay, well, it's your fault. It's your fault. You shouldn't have left the doors unlocked. That's why you had it stolen. Well, no, it's not my fault. The one who's at fault is the guy or girl who got into my car and drove off with it. It's not their car. That's who's at fault. Don't blame me for leaving my doors unlocked. You need to go with the route. You don't steal people's cars, right? That's the problem. And so it's kind of the same way. It's like, why are you blaming me? You're the one that's filthy. The world's the one that's dirty and a lie. Well, you should have taught him how bad it is. Well, why don't the world clean itself up? Anyway, going back to this, what happened to me was someone gave me this tab of acid, and I was like, all right. So I ended up picking out a day, and it was a Wednesday. Like I say, I wasn't going to church at that time. It's been a couple of years. I was the only one living in the house. My brother and sister were married. And so I ended up taking it early. I took this tab of acid about 8:30 because I know my parents took off. And so I drank a whole gallon of orange juice with it. And then it starts to affect you after about an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and you're like hallucinating. You're like in a zone. I remember going outside and the trees just moving all over, and there was no wind. And it was like a hurricane. And I was just like, tripping out. And I remember walking around the neighborhood and going to a couple of, friends that I knew and hanging out there and just going back home. And I had a car there. And by this time it was already starting, to be hours into this drug. And it was starting now to become evening. And it was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. And I remember getting and sitting in my car because I didn't want to go inside because I knew that my mom was inside now. She got home from work. She was a school teacher. And so I was sitting in my car. I remember staring at my hand, and my hand was just going back and forth, back and forth. And I was just having it still just like this. And I stared at that for probably about an hour. That's what the drug does. You're totally out of it. And I remember my mom coming outside and asking me if I wanted to go to church that night. And I was just like, no. And she's like, okay. It wasn't the first time. Like I say, I wasn't going to church at all, very practically at that time. And so she went inside, but my mom was always asking all the time if I wanted to go to church, even though I was never going. But she would always ask, and I remember her walking back, and she was just like waving back and forth. And so she ends up going to church. Now it's about 7 o'clock, and I go inside the house, and I'm like just zoned, tripping out. This drug is not going away. It's now about 7:30. I go into the bathroom, and I just look at myself in the mirror, and my face is melting off of my face. I'm watching this. My eyeballs are sliding down my cheek. It's not like you just blink and it's gone. It's literally, they're sliding down my cheek. And I'm washing my face, and it's just, my eyes are down here. And it was just like creepy. I was like, now I was getting scared, believing that this drug was never going to go away. Because if anything, I was hallucinating more at that time and under the influence than I was even 5 hours ago. And so what I did is I started snapping my fingers. I remember I was snapping my fingers like this, and I was walking around the house trying to think, and like, what am I going to do now? I can't go out into the darkness. It's nighttime. I'm going to hallucinating. I don't know what is going to happen. And so for the first time in 9 years, I cried out to the Lord. For the first time in 9 years, as I was snapping my fingers, I was saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And at that time I just said, oh my God, please help me. Please, God, help me. I need you now more than ever in my life. I need you. And at that moment, the voice that you have in your head, you have a voice in your head. That voice began to talk to me. Believe it or not, I wasn't even thinking what it was saying. It was just talking to me. And what it was saying was, do you see? And at that time, what happened is pictures started to flash in my mind. And it was like a strobe light. It was a strobe light with photos, and they were just fast, one after another, like boom, 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 boom. And every photo was something I was doing sinful that I would call fornicating, cussing, fighting, smoking, every sin. And every picture that I saw, I knew exactly what I was doing at that time and what I was doing, period. I didn't need a reel. I knew what I was doing. It's just every photo that just passed, I knew, and the voice in my head began telling me, do you see? Do you see what you're doing to me? Do you see what you've done to me, Sam? Not Sam, but do you see what you've done to me? Do you see what you're doing to me? And at that moment, I just began to wail. I began to cry. I just got on my knees and waterfalls were coming out of my eyes. I wasn't even crying. I was wailing. I was wailing for about like 10 minutes, like 5-10 minutes, just crying and crying. And the last thing I remember, that the voice in my head, it was my own voice. I wasn't thinking what it was saying. It was just talking to me. It told me, I will be with you always. That's what it said. I will be with you always. It said other things, but I can't remember. The only things I could remember was when those flashes of pictures were going through my mind. And those flashes of pictures were everything bad I ever did. And I knew what I was doing. And I remember the voice just telling me, do you see what you're doing? Do you see what you've done to me? And I can't believe that every time I talk about it, it just affects me. And the last thing I remember it saying was that I will be with you always. I wish I could tell you what else it said, but I don't remember. But at that moment, the drug completely went away. It was like more than 95% of that drug was gone. I was like no longer under the influence. I was like sober. I was like, wow. I went to the bathroom and I washed my face, and I was washing my face and putting water on my face, and I looked at my face, and my face looked absolutely perfect. Like, you know, when you're 19, you might have a blemish and pimple here and there. It was like I never smoked a cigarette, like I never drank a beer, like I've never done anything bad. I was just a perfect angel. I remember that, looking in the mirror, and I was amazed. I was like, oh my God. And at that moment, I wanted to go in my room. And in my room as a teenager, I had, posters, and I had CDs, a bunch of worldly CDs, and just, weed and bongs, and just shirts of Budweiser, and smoking weed, and just a whole lot of just junk. And I wanted to go into my room and just tear down the posters and everything and throw it in a trash bag and just throw it outside. I wanted to do that, but at the same time, it was about $2,000 to $3,000 worth of stuff at that time. And I'm 19, and I'm like, should I just throw everything out of here? Which I should have done is yes, but I didn't. I was talking myself out of it because I had so much stuff. And I was like, I'm going to tell you what, let me continue having this feeling tomorrow, and then I will know that this is what I need to do. But I never did it. The next day came, the following day came, and then I went out about 3 or 4 days after this occurred with Christians, because I wanted to hang out with, with Christian youth, and I went out with these Christians, and they were just cussing up a storm, listening to worldly music and everything. And I was just like, and just like that, I went back to my old ways. After this amazing encounter, after this clearness of this drug just being taken away from me, and this encounter with God, where the voice was even talking to me, and it said, I will be with you always. But yet, about less than a week later, I was back to just doing everything I was doing. Smoking weed, drinking, doing nothing. And listening to worldly music. And to make a long story short, my parents did move out of California, and when I was 19, and for the next 20 years of my life, from 19 to 39, I just, maybe 6, 7 years out of that, I was homeless. To be honest, I was homeless. I was either living in the streets or living in my car, living in shelters and just being homeless. I was drinking and, doing drugs. And it was during that time I was, going in and out of jail, for whatever, open containers, drunk in public, you name it, disorderly conduct, things that occur with homelessness and drinking. And when you're in the elements for 24 hours, 7 days a week, you're going to have run-ins with the police. And so anyway, that was my life. I was always losing jobs, getting hired here, losing them there. Couldn't hold a job. Um, just moving from city to city, trying to find work. I was living on my own. And during that 20 years, I maybe lived with my parents for about 3 times. I went to live with them, a couple months each time, but it was always the same thing. I'd want to, have a couple drinks, and that wasn't what they do. Like I say, it's really like, if we're not doing that with you, why do you want to do that with us? We're not drinking with you. Why do you want to drink with us? And so for the next 20 years till I was 39, truth be told, during those years, if I told many people my testimony, but nobody would believe that, yeah, God said he'll be with you always. Yeah, I don't see God working in you. I don't see anything happening, with you. You're not doing anything right, right? So for the next 20 years, and it wasn't until in 2017, December, I lost another job, that I couldn't handle. Under the influence, either sleeping in, calling in sick for work, um, drinking at work, whatever. Lost a job, and I just started trying to, call out to the Lord again. I would always talk to my parents during this time, and my parents, they would always tell me, go to church. That was their thing. They're always saying, go to church, get involved in a church, get connected with the church, have people at the church. Maybe they can help you. Maybe they can give you a place to live. Maybe they can get you a job. Maybe they can sponsor you, whatever, get involved in the church. They've always told me that during these 20 years. And I'm like, church doesn't pay me. I need work. I need this. I need a house. But anyway, I had a lot of complaints. And that was my life for 20 years. And it wasn't until I lost my job in 2017 in December. And I just said to myself, I got to go to church then. I want to go to church. So about February of the next year, 2018, I found a church, and I started going to this church. And I was going there for a couple of months, every Sunday, because that's the only time the church was open, was Sunday morning. They don't open Sunday night. There is no Wednesday service. There isn't no midweek service. There's just Sunday morning. And so I was just going every Sunday morning. I was trying to stay plugged into a church. Nobody would talk to me besides just the normal, oh, hi. That's it, like, bye. And nobody was connecting. And so it was about April of that year, 2018, that I went out to visit my parents. And, we had our disagreements, and it was back to blame games here, blame games there, and so it just ended bad. And it was like, what, we're just done with this. You're in your late 30s, you're unemployed, you're still drinking, you're not married, you don't go to church, nothing. We don't want nothing to do with you anymore. And I was like, well, I don't want nothing to do with you either. And so I took off and I headed back to Austin, Texas, whatever. And as I was going back to Austin, there's a casino in Oklahoma and Texas. And so I stopped at the casino and, rented a room there for about a week, and again, unemployed, spent the last of my money, bought a whole bunch of beers and cans of beers and liquor, losing money and gambling it away. And it was probably maybe the third or fourth day that I was at this casino. And I remember waking up, and I woke up on the floor. I woke up on the floor. Not on, even on the bed. I just woke up on the floor, and I was just looking around. I was surrounded by hundreds of cans of beer over the last like couple few days, being in this room, bottles, and I was just like hung over, and I was just don't. I didn't talk to my brother for maybe 5 years. I probably didn't talk to my sister for a couple of years. I don't talk to my parents anymore. And that's when I was just laying there, and I was like, God, what is wrong with me? Why am I this way? Why am I going through all this? I've never denied you. You say if you don't deny me here, you won't deny me there. What happened? Where's the you will be with me always? And all of a sudden, I just got a conviction. I got a conviction of you're the problem. You're the problem, Sam. No one's telling you to drink. No one's telling you to do drugs. You're the one who's doing all this. You're the issue. You're the menace to society. You're the problem in society. And it kind of struck me. I was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt like I was the worst person in the world. I honestly did. I felt like I was just like everybody knew me in a bad way. I couldn't even look at people in the eyes for the next couple of weeks. I was like, immediately, I was like, oh my God, help me. But I didn't feel God. I just felt conviction. I felt like I was just the worst. It wasn't a strobe light of photos. It was a days of everyone knowing that I'm just a problem, a menace in society, a just alcoholic, homeless bum, losing work. And I just felt terrible. I was so depressed. And I just started watching messages on YouTube. I just started watching hundreds of messages. I seen like maybe 30, 40 Billy Graham messages. I saw hundreds of other pastors just preaching and preaching. And they all had a common theme. The common thing was I was condemned. I was always condemned because I'm not doing anything right. I say I'm a Christian, but yet look at me. I'm condemned. Everything I do, I do wrong. And that's where I was. And I was staying in the hotel and just hearing my earbuds, message after message after message, and just depressed as can be. And I ended up going back to the room I was renting, Thank God for them. They'll always have a special place in my heart. They're in Austin, and I still communicate with them now. I mean, they weren't even in the church, and they were the ones that helped me out. But that's a whole nother story. And so I felt really bad. I was still going. I went back to the church that I've been going to for the last couple of weeks, and I was just wanting to talk to somebody. I felt like I needed to talk to somebody. I just needed to share them what I was going through, what I've been through, and I need help. And nobody would listen. Nobody would listen. Nobody would offer an open hand. Nobody cared. And so it was after the Sunday after this, in the middle, because I was depressed for about 2 weeks, that I made an appointment with the pastor. I said, I have to talk to you. And so they set an appointment with the pastor, and they gave me, I don't know, half hour or whatever. So I showed up, and I went in, and I go, Pastor, I just want to talk to you. I've been coming here for a couple months, and I feel like I'm the worst person in the world. I feel like I'm a sinner. And I started reading them off, Galatians, and how, I feel like I'm hellbound. And the only response he was giving me was like, yeah, that's you. Yeah. Like no words of encouragement, like no help. He wasn't telling me anything. He wasn't like telling me, well, I know you've been coming here. Let me maybe get you with one of the brothers that we have here, and maybe he can help you out. Or why don't you try coming to one of our small groups or just anything. It was nothing. It was just like, well, yeah. He was just hearing me out and not telling me nothing. And so I finally, my time was up, I guess like a shrink, that time is over. And so I ended up, I was leaving, and the only thing he gives me is a book. He gives me a book. I forgot what the book was, but he gives me a book. Any book I should be reading is the Bible. but I was reading the Bible. I was reading so much Bible. I was listening to so much messages. And after I went to see this pastor, I left there. And to be honest, it was like everything just lifted off of me. Everything just lifted off of me. I had no, like, as though I have a clear conscience now. I don't know what it was because that pastor didn't help me out for anything. I guess he did in a different way, but he never told me words of encouragement. He never invited me to do anything. It was just like now Jesus and the Spirit came back in me, and I just felt like filled of the Holy Spirit. I felt like I was on top of the world. I was like, Jesus, it's all about you. It's all about you. And I started to see what I was reading, and I'm like, this isn't Jesus. I'm not hearing Jesus in this condemnation. I'm going to the Old Testament. I'm like, ooh, I don't want to listen to the Leviticus because I'm supposed to be stoned to death, disobeying parents, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, the whole Bible was condemning me. The whole Bible from Genesis and the Old Testament and the New Testament, everything condemned me to death. The only one that saved me, was Jesus Christ. And it was at that moment that I realized that I felt comfort in reading the gospel. I felt comfort with Jesus. And then I started to differentiate the two. I started to say, it's you, Jesus. It's all you. You're the one that saves me. Everyone else condemns me. All these messages I've been hearing in the YouTube, it's all the same. It's like copy and paste. I'm always condemned. It's iron sharpening iron. Don't do anything. You're a sinner. And it's always Jesus that saved me. And so I was like a completely different person after talking to that pastor. It was after 2 weeks. I couldn't even look at people in the eye. I felt like going under a rock and just dying. I felt so depressed. And now all of a sudden I felt like a big relief in my life. And I was just amazed. I was like, I felt like a new person. And now I wanted to go to church all the time. And now when I went to church, I was like, oh, I know this. I know this part of the Bible. It's all about Jesus and Jesus. And then I continued to go to that church for a couple of months. Okay. For about another month, I went to that church. And I kind of noticed, or what I thought was that they just have Sunday morning. I'm like, you guys don't have anything else going on here. Well, maybe for me, I asked my roommates and I said, hey, would you mind if I, invite people from the church to come over and have a pool party? Because they live, they have a swimming pool right next to them. And maybe have a barbecue and everything. And they were all for it. These are people that they don't go to church. And they were like, yeah, of course, go ahead, invite them over. And I started inviting everyone to my house. And for me, I like to plan it. I'm not going to say, hey, why don't you all come over tonight, or tomorrow. So it was like 2 weeks out. And I remember going and I passed out flyers all around and I was just shaking people's hands. And I was the one shaking people's hands. People weren't shaking my hands. So as a matter of fact, when I would shake people's hands, they'd just look at me like, hi. Like, okay. Hi to you too. God bless. But I was like, I was on fire for the Lord. I totally felt on fire for God. This was in April of 2018. 2018, I was like just on fire for the Lord. I was finding another church for Wednesdays because this one didn't have any. I went to another church on Wednesday and I was always talking about the Lord. But this one specific church, it kind of came to a head because I was inviting people. And so the elders came up to me on a Sunday. And they just told me, they said, hey, you can't be doing that. And so I was like, oh, well, it's because, I wanted more than just the church. I wanted actually to maybe talk to people about God out of the church. Let's get together. Let's worship the Savior that we have, Jesus Christ. And so they're like, no, you can't be doing that here. You can't be doing it. I was like, oh, okay. And so I think it was the next week that I approached, or they approached me again. To talk, I guess, whatever. And I just told them, I go, one thing I noticed over the last 3 or 4 months here is that you never preach about Jesus. And they didn't. He never preached about Jesus, the pastor there. It was always in Galatians, or let's go back to the book of Daniel. Let's talk about Corinthians. And so anyway, to make a long story short, one of the elders, okay, this is an elder of the church, he tells me, well, what are we supposed to do? Talk about Jesus' birth every week? That's what he told me. He goes, well, what are we supposed to do? Talk about Jesus' birth every week? And I was like, wow. First of all, you're an elder, but secondly, you think that that's all Jesus is just his birth and his crucifixion? You don't know everything else that he talks about in the Bible? And not to mention, when you say, are we supposed to talk about Jesus' birth every week, that he doesn't even talk during that portion of the Bible? It's just being told of what he went through, his mother, Mary, and stepfather, Joseph. And I was just amazed. And so at that time, I took it upon myself because they told me, well, if you don't like it, you could just go somewhere else. And so I said, I think I will. And I just told him, I said, I'm just going to kick the dust off my feet and I'm going to go somewhere else. And so I did go somewhere else. And right the following week, I went to a different church. And this new church that I went to, as soon as I walked in the door, they were welcoming. They're like, oh, hi, is this your first time? And I was like, well, yeah, it's my first time. They're like, oh, awesome, great. Well, hey, you know what? We got a ritual here. For the first time guests, we give them a free drink at the coffee shop, whatever drink you like. And so I was like, oh, really? So they walked me over there and they made me a Frappuccino, whipped cream, everything like it was a Starbucks. And I was like, wow, now this is the way to get welcome to a church. I went into the church, they slap a Frappuccino, large one on my hand, and I'm like, awesome. I went to their Sunday school. And so I went the following week as well. So I went 2 weeks to that church. And it was, I think, the Monday or Tuesday after that, I get a call. And I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was the pastor or assistant pastor or if it was whoever called me, but they called and started the conversation like, hey, Sam, how are you doing? And it was like negative, I was like, oh, I'm doing fine, because they introduced that we're calling from the church. And I was like, oh, I'm doing good, thank you. Maybe they got word that I needed to talk to the pastor in the other church, right? I don't know. But anyway, I was like, I'm doing good, I've had a complete experience with God, I was on fire for the Lord. And I go off telling him about 10, 15 minutes of what the Lord has done for me, how I feel good about Jesus, and I feel on fire. And it was like out of a comedy show. Okay, it was like out of a comedy movie where when I finished talking, because I talked for about 10, 15 minutes straight about the goodness of God and the Lord and how I feel, the first thing he tells me is, Sam, I think you're possessed with a demon. I was like, I'm possessed with I'm sorry, what? Like, where'd you get that? I've been talking about the Lord and how good he's been in my life. And he's like, yeah, I think you have a demon. And I'm going to tell you that you're not going to be welcomed back at this church until you repent and get on your knees and repent before the Lord. And I was like, wow, where in the world did you get this? I didn't even know where you got this from. And so that church was short-lived. And so for the next summer, I started going to churches every single time. I was on fire. I wanted to be with people of the Lord. I wanted to talk about Jesus, and everything was about Jesus with these people. I would always talk about Jesus. And so that summer, I was just going to churches after churches after churches. And I went to about 20 to 25 different churches in Austin in 2018. I went to about 20 to 25 different churches, all different churches. And there was one church that I went to that first time at this church, never been to this church before. I went to this church and I sat through the message and I was listening to it and I was like, oh, that's great. And so the pastor was saying things about Jesus that wasn't really there. And so I was like, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the pastor after the service and I just want to, chat with him and share with him what my view is. Because I was reading the Bible I was reading the Bible like nonstop during this time. I was going to churches. I was in the Bible. I was like totally just on fire for the Lord. God just completely just like, I was used to drink in the past, but I'm not even an alcoholic in a sense that Alcoholics have to battle their addictions and everything, but God just took everything away from me. I don't even have a desire to drink. I don't have a desire to drink. And so I went to this church, and I was, it was during the summer of 2018, and I just went up to the pastor after the service, and I talked to him for less than 5 minutes. Less than 5 minutes. But I went there and I talked to him for about a minute. He talked to me for about a minute. And then this big old deacon came, right? This guy's about 6'3", 6'4", weighs about 280 pounds, and comes and he comes to and stands next to the pastor, kind of wants to hear what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, so it's very cordial, it's very calm. I'm just talking and so the way I view it is that when Jesus did this, and I was just sharing with him and share with him a minute. Pastor talks to me for about a minute. I started to talk again, and that deacon just goes, you know what? You need to get out of here. Puts his finger in my face and say, you need to get out of here. And I was like, this is less than 5 minutes. And the pastor was like, well, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. He tells the deacon, it's okay. It's okay. But he just was ready to fight me or something to get out. I'm like, wow. I just went up to the pastor, and this is the church, and that's the deacon. I'm like, whoa, this is crazy, but I left, never went back. I only went there once, never went there again. Went to other churches. I went to another church that it was funny because this church wasn't even on the map or anything. I was looking for another church, but I ended up going to this church. And when I went to that church, it was everybody in that church was looked back at me when I walked in. They were like, who's that? And when I talked to a couple of people after, they all said the same thing. How did you hear about this church? As though I wasn't supposed to be there. I was like, this must be some cult, some secret society church or something, because it wasn't even on the map. I happened to find it because the other church I was looking for wasn't there. Either it closed down or whatever, and I just happened to pass by this one, and I looked, and it wasn't even on the maps. And I just stopped by, and I went in, and they were a cult or something, I guess. I don't know, but they were they had a look of what are you doing here? All right. Anyway, to make a long story short, as time was going on, I kind of realized that people don't want to hear about Jesus, right? I'm going to these churches. They don't, if you go to a church knowing the Bible, you're a problem. That's interesting because in biblical days, they would rejoice when a brother comes to the church, right? But churches, they don't want people who know the Bible. They want people that don't know the Bible so that they could teach them, right? That's what I learned. And the reason why I say that is because the final church I went to in 2018 was Hyde Park Baptist Church. That was the final church that I went to. And I only attended this church for a total of about 2.5 months. But it's because I wanted to get it plugged in. But I tried a different method with this church. The method I was going to have with this church was I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to go in and maybe, throw in my 2 cents here, if the question was arised. And so I didn't really say anything. And so they put me in with the singles, the 30s. I mean, I was in my 30s. The singles are in their 30s. And so they actually wanted to put me with the 40s and up. But I was in my 30s. And so I went with the singles in their 30s, and I actually got a lot of Facebook friends from that church, and I still have them to this day. I have a handful that are even on my Facebook account now. And so I went to this church, and I was making it because I wanted to make it a habit every time they had service to be there. And so I was there, on every Sunday. That was usually the only time they have it. If they had one on Wednesday, I would be there. And so a couple of months had passed by, and they had a Facebook page for the group for the singles, but it was empty. There was nothing on there. And so after a couple of months, I was like, I'm going to see if people, maybe they want to just come over to my house and we could talk about the Lord. They're singles, they're in their 30s. I'm in my 30s. And I asked my roommates, I said, hey, would it be all right, if I bring some people from the church and we can have them here? And my roommates they're always, these people don't go to church, and they're always like, well, yeah, sure, of course. Bring them over. Let's talk about God. And so I was like, okay, awesome. So I went and I made a Facebook post on the group page that they invited me to be on. There was maybe about 50, 60 singles in that page from that church because there's nothing else on there. And so immediately the page got taken down. I was like, oh, okay, well. And I was told, I guess, by the secretary that I'm not allowed to make posts. They make the posts. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I was just, because I don't see nothing here. I want a little more than just, going to church. Now, I know it's kind of going to my old, I'm not trying to be rebellious here. I'm just like, are we going to talk about God here? Do we talk about God? Or is it always like, like just church? Can we have church outside of church? Can we have a church outside of church? And, but anyway, I wasn't really telling them that. But then a week later, they had an outing with a couple of the guys to go to a taco place in the Domain right there in Austin. And so I was like, okay, well, like me, I'm always trying to get involved, and I went there, and so the pastor there, to me at this point, I'm totally Jesus. I'm totally Jesus today. Jesus is the one that saved my life. The rest of the Bible condemned me, right? And so I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so if somebody talks about another part of the Bible that kind of contradicts what Jesus says, I always go with what Jesus says. And so I guess it was kind of a contradiction that taco evening on Saturday night. But I still showed up the following morning on Sunday. And it was with the Sunday school teacher that had that meeting. Maybe it was because of the fact I made a post so that we could get together, that they made a post to go out to eat tacos. And to make a long story short, I went on Sunday, didn't say anything. They got cameras all over this church. They have cameras everywhere. I'm not interrupting the pastor. I'm not interrupting the Bible study. I'm not bothering people in the church. I'm just there. And I get a call. I get a call on Monday or Tuesday from the church. This is a church I've been going to for about 2.5 months. And it was another deacon. And he said, hey, Sam, yeah, I was calling because I think we probably have different views of the word. And so we're going to ask that you don't come back to the church anymore. So he told me. And at this time, I was like, I was getting tired of churches, just 1, 2 people kicking me out of the church. I'm like, doesn't the Bible say to take it before the church? I didn't have any problems with anybody in this group of 30s singles. I didn't have any problem with these people. They're my peers. And it seems like people that were older, maybe in their 60s, were the ones that were always like protecting the flock, so to speak. Like I'm some, heathen because I talk about Jesus. I don't have a different Bible. I speak what the Bible says, what Jesus says. How can this be turned into a negative? And so anyway, I was disagreeing with him. He's like, no, I'm telling you, you can't be coming to this church anymore. You're no longer welcome. And I'm like, well, why don't we ask the class? Why don't we ask the other peers that are there? Because I don't even talk to them. I don't have any problems with them. I have Facebook friends that are in that class. And I'm like, why am I being, always blackballed in church? I'm not even doing anything in this church, for crying out loud. And so I was like, why don't you talk to them? They're like, no, we're the ones that make the decisions here. And we made a decision that you're no longer going to be allowed to come to this church. And so I just said, you know what? I think we need to ask the class. I have done nothing wrong. I've done nothing wrong. You have cameras all over your church. Find a camera where I'm disturbing somebody, where I'm bothering somebody, where I'm interrupting the pastor or Sunday school class. You're doing this because of what happened in Taco Tuesday and Taco Saturday and at the Domain. It's just because I talked about Jesus. We weren't even in the church. And so anyway, I was like, I'm going to still go to the church, even though I was going to go just that one last time in my own mind, because I wanted to show that no, like I'm tired of, like I say, 1, 2 people kicking you out of a church. Why don't you ask the other people if they want me to leave? If they're okay with me, I'll stay. If they're not, I'll leave. And besides that, they're my peers, not you. You're like in your 60s. They're in their 30s. I'm in my 30s. Anyway, to make a long story short, they said, if you come to the church on Sunday, you're going to be arrested. And I was like, you're going to arrest me for just going to church? Don't you just want even people just to listen? I mean, like I say, you got cameras everywhere. Your cameras will show you that I never interrupt or bother anybody. And so they say, yeah, we're going to arrest you if you come to the church. And this was Thanksgiving week. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to have to go to the church just one more time. And I went to the church, and sure enough, I was arrested. I was arrested for trespassing, and I went to jail, and they sentenced me to 30 days in jail. I sat in jail for 30 days. No good time. They put me in jail for 30 days. I went to church for 30 days. You know, the old rule in jail is they say, you don't go to jail for going to church. I sure did. Not only that, but I got about a $1,500 fine. I don't know if it was $1,500 or $2,000 because I had to pay probation. They put me on probation, supervised probation. I had a probation officer I had to check in with every month. Drug tests every month that I had to pay for trespassing, for going to church. And that was it. I was done with church. You know, I realized, you know, churches are they're structured. They're commercial. Churches are commercial. They're mainstream. That's what it is. Especially mega churches, mega churches. Don't ever expect to learn anything from a mega church. Okay. Now, granted, okay, you may have a small percentage of these churches that actually still try to do what the Bible speaks. So I'm not going to say all of them because there are a couple out there that are really trying, you know, to be Jesus and Bible based, you know, but in the end of the day, all they are is just commercial and mainstream. You see what they do is they get a pastor, right? Because you can't go to a church and just everyone just talk and everyone just, you know, share. You got thousands of people here. So what they do is they have a pastor that they agree with and they believe in the message that he speaks to speak to the congregation so that they can nod and say, that's right, we agree with that, right? And the bigger the church, the more mainstream it is. They're commercial, right? That's what it is. I mean, trust me, when a church is raking in millions and millions of dollars, Jose the plumber is not going to be counting that in the back, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, you ain't going to have, you know, Bob the pizza delivery driver going to be counting the millions of dollars in the back, right? No, that ain't happening. It becomes a corporation. It becomes a business. It's commercial. That's what churches are, mega churches. And so they're going to stick to their brand, right? This is their brand. It's like you're going to a Walmart. It's like you go to a Target. You got to have college educated people with degrees in management and business. They don't even need to be Christian, right? They can say they're Christian, whatever, but this is who's going to be taking care of a church. Now, I say all this not to condemn a church, okay? I'm not here to condemn churches. You see, judgment begins in the church. It doesn't stay in the church. Judgment begins in the church. It doesn't stay in the church. And the reason why I say that is because I'm done dealing with churches. Church is never going to change, okay? They're going to keep doing what they're doing, because that's what's been working for centuries and centuries, right? Is they're going to stay structured. They ain't going to change. That's why I went to a service one time and they asked me if I wanted a bulletin. I said, no, I'm okay. Why? I already know what you're going to do. You're going to sing songs. We're going to hear a message. We're going to go home. That's a church. The reason why I go to church now is to support the message. I don't go to learn anything, right? But again, I rather have churches in every street corner than liquor stores. Okay, so I don't have any problem with the church. I leave them alone. If they're doing God's will and they have God's word and the message is there, do what you're doing. I'm not here to change the church or destroy the church. I learned in that year of 2018 that the church, they're all the same. You know, there's so many people that are not Christians in the church. Why? Because if they want people that aren't Christians in the church, that's the whole point. If you go into the church and you already know your Bible, you're a problem. You're a problem. They want people that they can disciple. They want that. It's not for that. And so the reason why I say that is that I don't have a problem with the church. I wish there was a church on every street corner. And anyway, to make a long story short, I fast forward to today. You know, I've been working at the same job for nearly 5 years. I think the people who gave me that opportunity at my job, you know, they gave me an opportunity. I've messed up a lot in the past. I've failed a lot of people. I failed a lot of people that have given me a lot of opportunities. And it was due to my homelessness, drinking, wandering, not knowing anything. And God cleared all that from me. And I appreciate them. I appreciate where I'm at now, you know. And so I want to share with you what helped me, because I thank God for everything I have to this day. Like I say, I couldn't hold a job for longer than 3 to 4 months. And now I've been at a job now for almost 5 years. And I appreciate them. I thank God that they've allowed me to be there, that they've given me an opportunity. And so I thank God for everything that I'm at. I go to church now. I'm not trying to tell people to go to church. I go to church and I appreciate everyone who's there. They do what they feel that God is calling them to do. Okay? I'm not there to tell them not to. You got to have order. You got to have structure. And that's what they're called to do. And if I go to a church, I go to just support the message that they speak. I don't go to learn anything. Why? Because I already have the teacher in my heart. I already have the teacher in my heart. I don't need to learn anything. And that's what I want to tell you with the gospel. And we're going to be going every week through the gospel. And the reason why is so that there's no excuse. We're going to go from verse to verse to verse, chapter to chapter to chapter to chapter. So there's no excuse. There's no excuse of, oh, he's misinterpreting the Bible. He's taking things out of context. He's doing this. No. No, you're going to have your freedom. You're going to have your freedom and your eyes are going to be opened. Because now we're going to see Jesus in his entirety. And the only way that you need to come to Jesus is to understand that everyone in life will fail you. Everyone will fail you. I was a failure to many people. And people will fail me. People will fail me all the time. And people will fail you. Your parents will fail you. Your kids will fail you. Your friends, your brothers will fail you. Everyone will fail you. A judge will fail you. The police will fail you. Everyone will fail you. Why? Because everyone's a failure. And you need to realize that. You need to understand that everyone's a failure. The only one that you can trust, the only one you can put your faith in is Jesus Christ. I'm telling you. And we're going to go chapter by chapter by chapter by chapter. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the way it's supposed to be read. So, this is the intro, and this is the gospel, episode 1, and we'll continue next week. God bless and stay blessed.